Mary Scott told me that I had the same time allocation as everybody else, so I had 2.5 minutes. So I'll try to make the most of that time. I want to go back to something Cameron said to start this conversation today, because I think it really is the impetus of why we're all here. We're all here possibly with a different perspective, a different opinion, variety of reasons, but I think deep down we all have one thing in common: we want what's best for our children. And we want to ensure that our state, the state of Alabama, maintains our right to determine what it is our children learn and how they learn it, especially at the local level. And I share that with Cameron. Alabama Policy Institute has been a resource to me, and I applaud them for the work they do. But I come from the perspective of, when I look at where our children go, we have to look at what those expectations are. And we have an opportunity in our state now that we've never had before. I've done this work for 35 years. And we now have an opportunity to have a conversation between K-12, post-secondary, higher education, and business and industry with a set of standards that now we can share in common, and that we now can have a set of assessments that very proudly Alabama shares with no one else, because we're not part of the two assessment consortiums going on across the state with Race to the Top funds. We have our assessments that are commonly used in post-secondary and higher education that have ACT and work keys as our benchmark, and we've been able to downward design to grade 3, so that we're able to sit down with a parent for the first time, and rather than try to explain what a stay 9, and those of us in education know what those crazy terms are, stay 9s and scale scores, but I can say to J.W. Carpenter, our friend with Teach for America, that your child's in 5th grade and he or she has scored X in mathematics. And if we stay on this trajectory, we could predict a 33 in mathematics on the ACT. That's a conversation that will be meaningful to the folks in Alabama. And we're the only state that's doing that right now. So we're excited about what that could look like. Cameron gave some great examples of areas where we need to share concern and ensure that Alabama does everything in our power to ensure that we remain sovereign from those federal overreaches. But I'm very proud to say that for Alabama, we did not receive Race to the Top. And as I speak to my fellow state superintendents across the state, across all the states, those who did receive it, wish they could get it back. So we're very blessed that we didn't get it. So thankfully, we're not constrained by any of the requirements under Race to the Top. We're not part of the two national assessment consortia that are being funded through Race to the Top, so we're not constrained with any of the reporting information or any of the things that go along with that federal funding. And as Cameron mentioned, we're one of 3 states that have not received a longitudinal data system grant. And data is, as you've heard today, awfully important. So we've made the commitment in Alabama to develop our own assessment system, our own longitudinal data system, and very proud to say that we now have it housed in an Alabama company at the Alabama Supercomputer Authority. It is our homegrown approach to make sure that all of our data is safely kept where it needs to be. I do want to share 2 other things, to be brief, so we can get to the conversation, which is the most important. I spent the first 6 months of my 18-month tenure as state superintendent talking with our customers, with business and industry, with our folks in higher education, Maryland, with our folks in our 2-year colleges and our technical schools, asking them what it is you need from us that you're not getting. Surprisingly, the thing that came out of that conversation was not what I expected, because the answer from business and industry, and spent a lot of time here in Huntsville because of your impact on our state, and from higher ed, and not education majors in higher ed, but arts and science folks, was that our students seem to lack intellectual curiosity when they graduate. That should come as no great surprise, because not casting stones, we've been preparing kids for a decade to take a test. We've now set the spring test into perspective, so as Kathy and Jeannie described, we're focused more on what happens day to day in our classrooms. And if I could give one example of the shift that I use regularly that brings it home for me, for my 3 children that are in Alabama Public School, is in the past we asked our children to do 3-digit addition and come up with the correct sum. As was described today by Camille, we give them multiple problems and they do them, and at some point over the time we would determine they've done enough, that they were proficient. But today, under our new standards, if this was my class, I would ask you, based on the mathematics that we have been talking about this week, take this real-world situation, talk among yourselves, and determine the mathematics that's required to solve this problem. Come up with as many potential answers and solutions to that you can. Determine the one that you feel best solves the problem, and explain to the rest of your class why you made that choice. When I go back to listening to business and industry and higher ed and post-secondary and the folks that get our customers, they need kids who can take content and apply it to real-world situations, collaborate with their peers to solve problems, think critically in situations they may have never seen before, and understand it's important to be able to defend your answer when questioned. That's what these standards will take our students to. We're not a race to the top state. We're not part of the assessment consortium. We've not been part of the longitudinal data system grant. Any data that we share outside the state of Alabama to the federal government goes in cohort status with no individual identified information. We've been very careful through the leadership of the State Board of Education not to jump onto the bandwagons of InVolume and some of these other groups that are getting states to come together to share all their information that can go in a variety of places. As Kathy Basile said, your formative assessment is only valuable to you in Huntsville. I don't even need it, because it would mean a darn thing to me in Montgomery. But you can use it to guide instruction in Huntsville. That's the new day that this brings to us. So I just applaud everyone who's here. My dream in this conversation is all of this energy, regardless of the perspective you come from, if we could harness that energy and focus on what I consider our biggest concern, and that's the overreach of the federal government, not just on standards, but in a variety of venues, that would be a wise effort of our energies. I've told the Secretary of Education to his face, and told him this on numerous occasions, we'll have to have a relationship of respectful defiance, because I feel very confident that the folks in Alabama know what's best for Alabama students, and we can make sure that we get there and would appreciate you staying in Washington. Just like I have full confidence that the folks in Huntsville, Casey Wardetsky and Kathy and the others that are here, know what's best for Huntsville. So we set the what for the state of Alabama and Montgomery through our state board, and we turn you loose to be innovative and creative and come up with learning opportunities that we may have never thought about before. That's where we are in public education. And again, my hope in this conversation, regardless of why you came, is that we can agree on the things that are concerns to us and focus this invaluable amount of energy on those things to make sure that, number one, our students are successful and that we remain Alabama sovereign in what we do in public education. Thank you.
So we're running about 15 minutes behind. What I'd like to do is take a 5-minute break instead of a 10-minute break and come back